Welcome to the Exploress. Time traveling through women's history, one era at a time. I'm Kate Armstrong. It's officially FYREBIRDS month on the Exploress. To celebrate the release of my second novel and the conclusion of the NIGHTBIRDS series, I'm sharing an episode from my other podcast, Pub Dates, where I've been taking listeners behind the scenes on this book series creation. In this episode, I'm going to answer readers' burning questions about NIGHTBIRDS. Warning, there will be spoilers in here, so maybe save this one for later if you haven't read the book yet. Now, grab your flapper get-up and get ready to drink some magical cocktails. Let's go traveling. But first, I'd like to remind you that FYREBIRDS is hitting shelves on August 27th, and it would mean an awful lot if you'd pick up a copy. If you do it by September 4th, I'll send you some special prizes, including a signed bookplate and some exclusive NIGHTBIRDS-inspired art. To find out more about it and how to claim, just check out this episode's show notes, or go to my author website, katejarmstrong.com. Also, are you reading NIGHTBIRDS for the first time, or want to refresh yourself on the plot before FYREBIRDS comes out? Over on Pub Dates, we've just posted a 4-week read-along series, just for you. Hello! Welcome to Pub Dates. I'm Kate Armstrong.
And I'm Amie Kaufman.
And we're taking you along with us on the journey through publication for our novels, The Isles of the Gods and NIGHTBIRDS. This is episode 30. It's time for some NIGHTBIRDS spoilers! At last.
Let's do it.
Let's do this.
Yes.
I've been fanging for this episode.
Yeah. Now, listeners, there were a lot, and I mean a lot of questions. So we have done our best to pick representative questions. If yours is not here, I am so sorry. We could have done a series on them. I hope we have kind of represented it with another question. That's what we've tried really hard to do. So here's a question from Brittany, who asks, which budding romantic relationship was your favorite to write, and which ship is your favorite?
Yes, starting strong, coming in hot with a romance question, Brittany. And I did promise that we were going to do a prize giveaway for this spoiler episode. And Brittany, lovely Brittany, you are going to be you are the recipient of said prize. And I'm excited to send it to you because I know for a fact, since we met at one of my tour events in the US, that you have been hanging out for a copy of the NIGHTBIRDS map, and you're going to get one.
Oh, congratulations, Brittany. It's a match made in heaven.
Congrats, Brittany. Yes. Okay, so answering this question, I mean, I really want to say all of them because I love them all so much. It's really hard to choose which budding romantic relationship was my favorite to write specifically. I mean, I just really love Fen and Sayre, I have to say. I think both as a reader and as a writer, there's something about writing two people who are just so emotionally repressed. And seeing them have to shed so many layers to finally get to each other that I find very satisfying. Fen and Sayre are two characters with very hard external shells who, hard-earned. They have been hurt many times in the past, but they both have such deep loyalty and deep feeling for the people who they love. So I really enjoyed writing this kind of unspoken, angsty tension between the two of them. They have a lot of things to work out. They both really need a hug. And I am just really excited to see their I mean, I just loved every scene that they were in. I just really, and I think too, because they're such good friends, and yet there's so much that they still haven't explored in that relationship. There's just so much to say and so much to explore between the two of them. And I can't wait to hopefully in the sequel see them do some of that. But I have to say honorable mention to Alec and Mathilde. I just love
Mhm.
characters who bicker. I love banter. I love
Yeah.
bickering. And those two characters who you can tell just they are forever fighting, but mostly what they want to be doing is making out. And I just found every scene in which they appear together really delightful to write.
I found it really
I
delightful
really
to
did.
read.
Yeah.
All right, it will not shock you to hear that that is not the only romance question we have. So I am going to take us seamlessly on to Belinda, who asks, you mentioned the love triangle on the romance episode, but I'd love to hear more about why you chose to put that into Matilda's story and how you went about putting it together and creating the two love interests and their relationships with our Nightbird. It's a
Okay,
good
well, I have
question.
to start it's a very good question. And I have to start by saying, and I recognize this is a controversial opinion, but I really love a love triangle. I do, as a trope. Look, when it's done well and when it's done with purpose, I know that love triangles can also be, a lot of, they can be tedious. But I just felt like specifically when I was thinking about Mathilde, I knew very early on that she was going to have more than one love interest. And when I was thinking about those two, why I wanted her to have two different love interests was because I wanted these two gentlemen to represent very different lives and very different paths for Mathilde. So you have Denon, who is suave. He's sophisticated. He's very much like her in a lot of ways. He comes from a great house. He was educated in the same circles as her. He loves games and puzzles, and he's got a, silver tongue. And they have a lot in common, both in background and in temperaments. And he, throughout the story, is offering her the kind of life that her family has always wanted for her, a life of wealth and privilege and money and influence. And she, as much as she fights against that, she also feels drawn to that. And I was really interested in exploring that push and pull. But then you also have Alec, who I just love Alec so much. Alec is, he couldn't be more different from her. He grew up an alchemist's apprentice. You don't find out a lot about his background really in book one, but I know what it is, and it's very interesting. I mean, he was essentially adopted by Craston, who's one of the city's best alchemists, and he's ambitious and he's talented. I wouldn't call him charming. He calls it like it is. He's very honest. Some would say blunt.
Mhm.
And he just doesn't have like any patience or time for Matilda's nonsense. Of course, he also loves it, but he they're always bickering because they are so different, but he challenges her. He really pushes and challenges her to look outside of her the world, the small privileged bubble that she has been brought up in, and she's so sheltered, and he really pushes her to see a different way of being in the world, in looking beyond her garden gate and really seeing what else is going on around her. And I love that. I love the idea of him pushing and challenging her. So you have these two gents just represents different ways, different choices for her, different choices about her future, and also different choices about who she wants to be in the world.
Mm.
And, she is a character, as all these women are. They're characters who are trying to find their voices and carve their own paths, figuring out what that looks like. And these two boys really represent different paths that she could take herself down. And I just love the tension that creates. I find it really
Yeah.
interesting. And I knew from the very beginning, like Denon was one of the first characters I came up with. I can't tell you why. He just was. He was there looking suave, wearing like this really pale suit, he just looked so amazing. He had a little scar on his lip. He's like a little bit rough cut, but also polished. And I was like, yes,
Mhm.
let's find out about this gentleman. And I think too, it's interesting that with these two guys, Mathilde has known them both since childhood. But again, her relationships, like they're from very different spheres, very different worlds, and her relationship to the two and
Mhm.
what they bring out in her and what they kind of like allow in her, it's very
Yeah.
different. And Mathilde is a woman with many facets, and I think that they really helped to show her different facets as the story goes on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Thank you. I tried. I tried my best. Hope you liked it, Belinda.
All right. Next, we have Sarah, who introduced me to my new favorite phrase, which I'm going to be appropriating and
Yes.
using shamelessly for the rest of my life. So thank you.
Me too.
The question goes, first, I wanted to say I had hot guy blinders on while reading Nightbirds. Hot guy blinders. We all know
Perfection.
exactly what this is. I love it. Alec was obviously the correct choice for Mathilde, but Denon, I forgave that man everything and accepted every thin excuse he gave until he killed the suzerain. At that point, I couldn't pretend he was still a good guy. Still hot
Fair.
though, am I right? All right.
Still hot. And look, he's a complicated villain, right? Like, I don't know. Is he a bad guy? Is he a good guy? Is he maybe both? We'll see. Let's see in book 2.
All right. Here are Sarah's questions. The first is, why did you write in the present tense, and do you have any tips?
Ooh. Well, I wrote in the present tense because I wanted the story to have a sense of immediacy. With present tense, it really makes you feel like you're with the characters as the action is unfolding. And I knew that this book was going to be big, it was going to have a lot of characters, and I wanted it to feel as immersive as possible. And to me, present tense felt like the way to do that.
And the second question that Sarah has for you is, how did you make up Asa's language?
That's a wonderful question, and I want to give you a very intelligent and articulate answer. I have to say that in the beginning, I was mostly making up words that I thought sounded good.
Mm-hmm.
But I was being informed by something. I just wasn't thinking about it really actively. I definitely was looking to Celtic languages in terms of the feel and the sound. I knew
Yeah.
because Asa was coming from the Irish Isles, and I was thinking a lot about Ireland and the time I spent in Ireland. I was thinking about the Faroe Islands as well, which is,
Mm-hmm.
even further afield from where I am currently than Ireland. And I knew that that was kind of like the linguistic, I don't know, toolbox that I wanted to pull from. And so the key for me was sometimes what I would do is I would write something in English, what I wanted, say, Willen or Asa to say, and then I would look it up in sometimes I would look it up in Gaelic. Sometimes I would look it up in, I think it's Faroese. It's been a while since I looked at it.
Yeah,
I
it's
think that's
Faroese.
Faroese, yeah. And I would just see what the words looked like. And then I wouldn't use them, but I would just think about essentially like how does this sound? I would say them out loud. I would think about flow. And does this kind of sound like what I think Ace's language would sound like?
Yeah, I mean, 'cause there are so many approaches to something like this. Like, I'm good friends with a linguist who is capable of constructing you an entire language, but whether you need that depends on how much you're going to actually use. If you're
Yeah,
only going
exactly.
for a little, then I guess, guessing that this is a question from someone who writes, sometimes you don't need to overthink it.
You really don't. You really don't. I mean, when I came up with the phrase "kill ventra Aish," say, and if you haven't listened to the audiobook, the narrator Saskia Marleveld absolutely crushes all of the foreign languages that I concocted for the book, and especially Asa's language. She's so good. Um, but I was really just thinking about I knew what I wanted it to sound like,
Yeah.
and I crafted it based on that because it's going to be English readers who are reading this book, and I knew how I wanted it to make them feel and how I wanted it to sound. And then from there, it was really just about trying to keep it consistent. So anytime I was making up a new piece of her language, I thought about, well, what have I done already? And
Yeah.
how does this fit in with that? Does it still sound like it's from the same lexicon? So yeah, by feel mostly.
All vibes. All right.
All vibes, all vibes.
The next question is from Joe Ella, who asks, being as strong and powerful as the Nightbirds are, they still need the support of those around them, especially from their paramours. Love that word. How did you decide what key characteristics or personality traits were important for respective nightbirds and their love interests to balance out or complement each other when you were figuring out their dynamics?
Gosh, great question. So, when I'm thinking about someone's love interest, I always think about two things. What is it that would keep them apart, and what is it that draws them together? So, say for Asa, Asa is a character who is really a fish out of water. She's asking a lot of big moral questions about being a nightbird, about her place in this new world, about her magic. And I knew that I wanted her love interest to, well, first of all, I wanted it to be someone that was essentially forbidden to her. I was interested in, they are not supposed to talk to their hawks. They're not supposed to see their faces. A nightbird and a hawk, their bodyguard, are not supposed to have almost any interaction at all. It's just a safety thing. And obviously that all those rules get shattered immediately.
Falls apart quite
Immediately.
soon. Yep.
Quite soon. And so already you have this really interesting connection. Just, you know very little about these two characters at this point, but it's interesting that, like, ooh, these things are not supposed to be happening, and they are. What happens next? So that was interesting to me. But then I also wanted, if Asa is kind of shy and still trying to find her place, I wanted Willen to be someone, first of all, from home, someone who she would make an instant connection with because they both come from the same place, so they can connect on that level. But then Willen is someone who is also knows what it means to be a fish out of water in a lot of ways, but he's quite confident in who he is and what he wants from the get-go, and he helps Asa to be able to find that in herself. I loved writing the first conversation that the two of them have, in which she's confiding in him about what it means to be a nightbird and how she's worried about her magic and the kind of damage it can do. And he just very succinctly says, you're not going to do any you're not going to do any damage with your magic because you are a wonderful person. And I just don't think, I don't know, he says something much more articulate than that.
Well,
But
that's why
he
we're writers.
essentially is
We
just
get to
like,
revise.
yes, indeed. It's funny, you'd think I'd know that off the top of my head, but I do not at the moment. But yeah, I think I like love interests who have certain points of connection. I think that's important, but also that they're very different and that they can help to bring out things in each other. So Willen's confidence helps Asa to be more confident, even when he's not with her, even when he leaves the scene for a whole lot of the book. His words and his faith in her and his confidence stays with her and helps her to find her own. So that's often what I think about when I'm thinking about crafting love interests.
I love that. All right. Next, well, we have another love interest question, but not in the same vein. So Lauren asks, throughout the Pub Dates episodes, as you spoke about your Nightbirds characters, I imagined in my reading that I would be drawn to Asa. While all four gasp of the girls are beautiful and effervescent, and I'm drawn to them in different ways, I was especially enamored with Mathilde. Maybe I'm more like Asa, but want to be more like Mathilde. So I
Yeah, I
wondered,
feel
as you
that.
wrote, I mean, don't we all? So I wondered, as you wrote, whether there was a nightbird that you think you're most like and one that you wish you were more like. In shaping your
Mm.
characters, are there pieces of your personality woven in a less physical way than Fenn's eye patch?
That's a great question.
Isn't it?
It's a great question. Okay, so I would say that while none of these characters, I mean, I just don't think any of these characters are incredibly like me. They're all very unique for me. But absolutely, I put pieces of myself into these characters. I think I would have to say I'm the most like Mathilde. I feel the most kinship with her.
Mhm.
Um, I think because I also am a show pony. I love dressing up and going to a party. I like being on stage. When I was younger, when I was her age, I was known to make bold choices. The occasional bold choice. Also, her relationship with her grandmother. I was also really close with my maternal grandmother. I mean, she's the grandmother who she only passed away last year, and we were very close when I was a child. We were very close when I was an adult. And so I definitely see pieces of my relationship with my grandmother in Mathilde's trust and love and sort of her closeness with her gran. But Mathilde has a great poker face and she's a great liar. I have neither of these things. I am a horrible liar. And I'm a nervous oversharer. So if I'm ever in a social situation with you and I'm either like nervous, or sometimes it's not that I'm nervous. This is just how I make friends.
I was going to
I'm
say,
such an
I don't
oversharer.
think that you need to be worried or scared or nervous to overshare, Kate. I
You're
think it's
right.
just
I know.
part of the package.
I heard that coming out of my mouth and thought, really? I love to overshare. So yeah, I think Mathilde's, I do wish I had a better poker face like Mathilde, I would say. And then, you know, with Asa's definitely a lot more shy and retiring than me, but I identify with being a fish out of water. I've spent a lot of time, I'm American. I grew up in America and I've spent a lot of time living overseas, feeling a bit like a fish out of water. So I feel that in her. And also just the way she wears her heart on her sleeve, that is me.
Yeah.
That is
Is it
all
ever?
me. So yeah. And then I am not very much like either Fen or Sayer, but I really, really deeply admire both of them. Their determination, the way they've built their own families, carved out the lives that they wanted. They wear pants when they want, and they don't take no shit. Also, they're both very good at street fighting and doing things with knives. I wish I could do either one of those things. I mean, let's be honest, I don't really want to get into a street fight, but I'd like to know that I could and I would win.
Yeah. Yeah. The option is everything. All right. Next question is from the Lunar Librarian, who asks, what inspired you to include chronic illness in Nightbirds? It was great representation.
Thank you very much for that. I am glad you noticed. So I gave Alec a fantastical version of diabetes because my brother has type 1 diabetes. He was diagnosed when he was 3. He's had it most of his life. And I have always, always, always wanted to write a character with diabetes. And I decided that Alec was the one. I thought it would make sense for him. I wanted it to be a part of his story. It's not the main part of his story, but it does feature. And yeah, I think for me, I know that it exists. I know there are books where you have characters with diabetes in them. I think most of them are contemporary. I have never come across a fantasy that had a character with diabetes. And I think it's a very prevalent disease. It can be a very debilitating disease. And it's one that I wanted to see represented in the pages of one of my books. And I have to say that my brother, who is not a big reader, but of course, he's a big fan of me and a big fan of Nightbirds. And he both listened to it and read it, and he hand sells it to every single bookseller that he meets and just every single human he meets. He's a wonderful brother. But it's some of the, one of the most wonderful moments of having the book come out was having him message me and say, I didn't know how emotional it was going to make me to read this character and to see pieces of myself in him, and specifically to see diabetes on the page. It really touched me.
That's
And
beautiful.
it was beautiful. It was a really beautiful moment. And that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted, especially readers who know someone or have diabetes themselves. I just feel like it's sometimes an invisible disease, and it's one that
Yeah.
you have to manage. And it's hard. It's really hard. I grew up with a brother who has it, and it's hard. And I just wanted to see it on the page. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
why.
All right. Well, from that to the next one, these are segueing together beautifully because we're still talking about hard emotions. Abby
Mm.
says, Nightbirds is full of emotion and hard scenes. Were there any that were particularly hard to write? Were there any that were a breeze to write and just full of joy? So, what was hard to write?
I love this question because any scene that involves a huge amount of emotions I love writing them. Love
Mm-hmm.
writing emotions. It's the action scenes and the big scenes in which you have many people discussing what's happening that I struggle with.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like what was difficult emotionally, the hardest were probably Asa's interaction with the pontifex when she gets brought to the church and she
Yeah.
gets brought in front of this man. And I found that difficult to write. I felt very emotionally. Um, I was touched by it, because she's at such a low, vulnerable moment. I mean, they've just gotten out of the underground. She just did this incredible magic and saved all of these people, but then she also killed a couple of people. And
Yeah.
she's clearly just wrecked by what she's done, and she's at this moment of just like, if I could give this magic away, if I could have this man take it out of me, I would.
Yeah.
And that, to see her so low that she's willing to have this man stand over her and tell her, that she's broken and corrupted and can't be trusted with this magic, and that women are weak, and she kind of just nods along. It was
Mhm.
hard, but it was also very triumphant to see her by the end of that scene look up at him and say no. And that is a huge turning point for her.
Yes.
So I liked writing that, but emotionally that was,
Mhm.
it was like gut wrenching to write that scene. And the other one was probably a smaller scene, but around the same point in the book when Alec has a low blood sugar attack. That was an easy one to write in that I have experienced what it's like to have someone with a low blood sugar, a diabetic low blood sugar before. So I knew I was very
Yeah.
much drawing from experience, but it was also hard to put them on the page because in real life, it's really scary.
Yeah. All right. Flip side to that, what
Mm.
Abby asks about scenes that were a breeze to write and full of joy. What what was really fun? What just wrote itself?
Ooh, gosh. I mean, anything that was in a club, I just had an absolutely delightful time. The girls going out all dressed up to going into a gentleman's club, the Liars Club, a place they're not supposed to be. It was a difficult scene in that it's a big scene, lots of big revelations, things are happening, but I just loved the girls going out in the town and getting into mischief. That was fun to write.
Mhm.
There is a scene in the underground. It was actually one of the latest scenes that I wrote in the novel where Matilda and Alec are in kind of like a makeshift workshop, and they have a bit of they're having a
Mhm.
conversation. There's also a lot of romantic tension in that scene. Just had a
Mhm.
great time writing that. And then near the end, when Sayre's father, her horrible bad daddy, is essentially trying to abscond with her out of the palace, and Sayre is not in a good way. And then Fen arrives and just
Mhm.
absolutely decimates. She
Yep.
just absolutely slays and does this really, really cool magic to trap Sayre's terrible bad daddy in a cage. And I loved that. And then it
Yep.
and then it meets some feelings, and it's drama, drama, drama. Loved writing that.
Just watching you come alive while you describe that tells me how much you loved it.
Oh, yeah. So
Oh.
satisfying.
All right. So Megan Wald writes, asks, what are you the most sad that you had to
Mm.
cut? I'm interested to hear
I was
this.
pretty well, I'm pretty lucky in that I did not have to cut a lot. There were no there were very few big scenes that I had to cut. As you will have noticed, having read Nightbirds, listeners,
Mhm.
it's a fairly thick book. So my editor was kind to me and did not make me cut all that much in terms of scenes. But there was a scene that was set in a coffee shop called Astraline's Coffee Shop. And I was a bit sad. I mean, the contents of that scene ended up getting incorporated somewhere else. So it's not like there's this huge deleted scene that you'll never get. But I did really love that coffee shop, and I was sad to lose it as a setting.
Yes. All right. Laura says, I am pleased to say I have read both Nightbirds. I read it twice. We love you, Laura. And Isles. I
Oh,
can't.
Laura.
I will write in as well for the Isles episode. Please do, Laura. Kate, you crafted such a perfect read. Laura and I agree on this. All right, where am I on the question though? My question is, when you decided Fen was going to be the fourth in your Nightbirds group, I loved that twist. Also, how did you not spoil that your book has an elemental magic element? That was such a shock to me, and I loved the twist. Laura also adds, if I had to pick a favourite character, it is definitely Alec. I hope we see more of him in book 2, and I have a soft spot for Fen as well. I don't know how I will wait for book 2. Okay. Don't worry, Laura.
Oh, thanks, Laura.
Kate is editing as fast as she can.
I really am. I am
But all
doing
right.
that.
When did you decide
Yeah.
that Fen was going to be your fourth? And how did you not spoil the elemental magic element?
Well, I knew that Fen was their fourth from very early on, from the very first draft. I always knew that I like the idea with an elemental magic system that you had, 4 girls and they all lean towards a different element. And when those 4 elements are combined, they can become something more, something really special. I've always liked the idea of that in an elemental magic system. And I've also always wanted to write a book that had elemental magic. I just think that it's a system, it's sort of a base system that we've seen many times, but there's so many different spins you can put on it, as you and I have talked about in our magic episode, Amie. So I knew that Fen would be their 4th from very early on. And because I knew that, I very intentionally crafted Fen's story. I wanted Fen to be a surprise. I didn't want you I wanted a discerning reader to be able to maybe see it coming, but I didn't want it to be obvious. So it can be very difficult when it's your book and you know all the twists and turns to know if they're going to be twists and turns to readers. So I'm really glad that you found the elemental magic, the twist. I always knew from the beginning that was the basis of the magic system. But Fen, I very intentionally crafted Fen to be someone who was hiding her magic for lots of different reasons. And I wanted both that she had magic, that she was their 4th, and how she was hiding her magic to all be a really interesting reveal as you got into the book. So yeah, I loved having that kind of like tucked into my back pocket, knowing that was going to be a big reveal.
A really interesting reveal is something of an understatement, but yes.
Yeah, so I don't know. I love a big reveal. So yeah, I knew that from very early on, and Fen's character was crafted with that knowledge very much in mind and wanting it to be a satisfying reveal. And yeah, the elemental magic, I don't know. I'm just glad that felt like a twist to you, because I didn't know if it would or it wouldn't. But yeah, it's all in the revision, figuring out what little hints to put where.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think if there's one thing that's true of writing a book, it's that you start out confident that your twists are twists and that your jokes are funny and that, your stirring moments are stirring and your dramatic moments are drama. And then as you revise, you slowly just become less and less sure that you've even written coherent sentences. So,
indeed.
yeah, you got to hold faith to some extent. All right. And the final question comes from Pearl is reading this, who I think is probably asking the question that everyone who has made it to the end of this episode would like to hear answered. So well done for representing Pearl. The question is, how far are you into the sequel and what can you tell us about it? Now, you already told us you're heavy in revisions, but
I am.
What can you tell us to hold us over until it's out?
Oh my goodness. So recently on Instagram, in my stories, I asked people what they were most hoping to see in the sequel, and I was very happy to see that their interests and my interests aligned. So I can tell you, listeners, that you are going to get more Willin, more kissing, just more romance generally. We are going to leave Simta and we're going to go to a couple of new places, which I'm very excited to explore with you. We get to see more of what these 4 girls can do when their power is combined. So we're going to see some really big, very cool magic. And yeah, I think we're there. I still have some twists and some turns in store. But yeah, a lot of people have been asking about Willin. You will get more Willin. You will get more Alec. And I can tell you that you're going to get a point of view from Fen, which I'm very excited about.
Yes. Amazing. It's going to be very satisfying. Let's go with that.
Mm-hmm. You're going to see the girls just, kicking some ass and taking some names, for sure. Thanks for listening. Enjoyed this episode? Make sure to go and check out my other podcast, Pub Dates, where Amie Kaufman and I take readers behind the scenes on the publication process for our novels. And don't forget, if you want more Exploress in your life, I'm currently publishing 2 fresh bonus episodes a month over on my Patreon. You can find out more about that in the show notes or go to my website, theexploresspodcast.com, and click on Become a Patron.